Good. Hello, Central New York, and hello, hockey fans all across the internet, and welcome to the Central New York Hockey Report podcast right here on the Studio 25 Podcast Network. I'm your host, Scott Kimball, and we have got a really fun show lined up for you today. Before I bring in my guest, however, I am going to, as always, bring in my faithful co-host, my sidekick, if you will, Mr. Dave the Save Warner. Dave, how are you?
I'm great. I'm doing awesome.
Yeah, we were just...
And it's raining again.
It is, but you know what? At least it's not snow.
Yeah, but we missed spring.
Well, that's true.
We're jumping right into summer if the sun would ever come back.
But you know what that means? That means hockey season will be around the corner soon.
Yes.
So there.
And I have missed it. So
me too.
Yeah.
So there's always that.
All right.
All right. So I'm going to bring our guests in. Our guests, these guys combine two of my great loves in life, reading and hockey. And they are the author. They have 3 books, actually, but their latest one will be out next week. It's called Icebreakers, which I'm going to show you right here because I have an advanced copy. That's so kindly sent to me. We're going to talk about that book as well as their careers, Mr. Tom and Jerry Caraccioli. How are you guys?
All right. How are you?
I am fantastic. We appreciate you taking the time to come on. And you know what? Like I said, this is going to be a really fun show. So, of course, being the Central New York Hockey Report, you guys are from Oswego. So we definitely wanted to talk to you. So tell us a little bit about growing up in Oswego and how you got to love hockey so much.
Go ahead, Jer. Start it out. Okay. Well, I mean, we started skating when we were 5 years old. Our mom and our sister taught us how to skate on an empty rink that was about a block away from our house. And we used to go there every day and got involved in minor hockey. I think back then it was Tom, myself, and our older brother, Kev. Oswego Minor Hockey Association was about 5 years old. And I think that for the 3 of us, it cost $10 to play.
Wow.
Yeah. So
if only it could be like that again.
Yeah. So those were the days, as Archie Bunker used to say, right? So yeah, we grew up in the Oswego Minor Hockey Association, played all through squirts and peewees and bantams. Played high school at Oswego High School, and then played a year at Oswego State, and then decided, hey, you know what? We weren't going to make the NHL by any imagination. So kind of got into like what we thought we wanted to do, and here we are.
Well, I mean, you probably had a shot at getting the NHL. I'm sure you're just being modest. But
No, we didn't. We were little guys. We were little guys, so.
That's okay though. You still got to play college hockey, and that right there is an achievement in itself. So that's awesome. And growing up in Oswego, I will tell you that, and I talk about this with a lot of people. When you think about American hockey, people talk about hockey hotbeds being like Minnesota, Massachusetts. I've always said New York State is really one of the hidden gems as far as American hockey hotbeds. And Oswego certainly counts as that because, I mean, Oswego hockey is the king up there.
Jerry and I are also columnists for USA Hockey Magazine. And one of the things that we talk about as well, like you're talking about, is the idea of the hockey hotbeds. And not only do we say Oswego, but we say Central New York, from the North Country all the way down to the Southern Tier. That band of area that we're talking about that includes, all of us, clearly is a hotbed. And if you think about it, you go a little further west on Lake Ontario, you get into Rochester and you got Marty Reisner and you got Brian Giunta and I mean all kinds of people on top of Eric Cole from Oswego, right?
Yeah. So, we don't want to forget him, that's for sure. Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, you're right. Central New York, it's huge. I mean, Oswego, Syracuse, as I always said, was one of the underrated hockey towns. There's a great hockey history there. The Utica Rome area, of course, has always been, the Clinton Comets. I mean, it's just from top to bottom, it really is. And it's a shame almost that people don't know a lot about the New York State hockey history.
They know more than you'd think, though, actually, because in our travels and in our careers, whenever we have said we're, especially in sports circles, right? Whenever we've said, yeah, we're from Oswego, New York, they're always like, ooh, good hockey country up there. We're like, yeah, yeah. So it's more well known than you may think.
But that's actually reassuring.
But certainly with success of the people we mentioned, particularly Eric, he brought the Stanley Cup home to Oswego. It's hard to believe it was 20 years ago or 19 years ago now, but he brought that cup home, and it just gave everybody chills, quite frankly, to see that Stanley Cup, in our city, paraded around by one of our own. It was a tremendous experience, and for some of us who got to go to the friends and family party, and we were fortunate enough to be there, and take, we'll admit it, took a few sips out of the cup,
Hey,
and,
got to.
it was quite an experience, one that we'll never forget, particularly around this time of year with the playoffs going, and every time you see that cup come out there, and you have your own special memory with the Stanley Cup because of Eric. It just tremendous experience.
And that's one of the real.
Go ahead, sir.
Oh, sorry. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and especially with the the release of the book now, and as you can see, because you held up the copy and you've seen it, there are numerous pictures of the Stanley Cup and on all that. It's we made a particular point to make sure that those images of the Stanley Cup, because it's about dreams, right? And the book is geared towards kids and younger people, but it truly is a book about hockey history and dreaming. And everybody in that book had that dream. So, like Jared said, this time of year is just so special for all of us that follow hockey and love the game. Just can't wait to see that presentation in about a month. So.
Oh, for sure. And that's one of the really special things about the Stanley Cup, because other sports, if you have a kid from your town that went out and won, say, the World Series or the Super Bowl or the NBA championship, chances are really good that trophy's not coming to your town for the day. But if you got a kid that went out and won the Stanley Cup, guess what? There's a real good chance that cup's going to come to the town for one day, and you're going to at least get to see it.
Yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah, it's absolutely awesome. So let's talk about after you guys graduated from Oswego State. You're both very prolific writers, and so you said you were a columnist for USA Hockey, and I mentioned you've written 2 books before this one. So I want to talk about that a little bit. We're going to pull up a couple slides here, and we'll have you take us through those books and tell us a little bit about them. So the first one right here, Boycott: The Stolen Dreams of the 1980 Moscow Olympic Games. Tell us a little bit about this book.
I'll start that one. So we this was our second book, and after we wrote the first one, which I'm sure you'll put the slide up, and Tom can tell you about that one. We had a lot of people say to us, you got another idea for another book? Like as soon as we wrote the first one, and we said, well, as a matter of fact, we do. And it's along the same lines of the dreams and Olympics and whatnot, but it's a little bit more political. We've because we're history buffs as well. We've interspersed history with what was going on in the world with the particular story that we want to tell. And this book was about all the athletes in 1980 who had the one shot at making the Olympic team and didn't get it because of the boycott. And it's
They made the team. They just didn't get to participate.
Yeah, they made the team. They were Olympians,
Right.
but they didn't get to go because of the boycott. And some of them, we just went through the list of athletes and decided, okay, well, let's try and pick from the different sports and the different stories that may come about. And it was amazing how, we picked a gymnast and we picked a male gymnast and swimmers, of course, and a wrestler who happened to be Gene Mills, who anybody in Syracuse of a certain age would know who Gene Mills was. Gene the Machine Mills was the greatest. He probably was the greatest American wrestler of all time, and he didn't get the opportunity to go. He lives in Phoenix now. He's a teacher in the Phoenix School District, and he's on the cover up in the upper right hand corner. Looks a little like Robert De Niro in that, young Robert De Niro.
Yeah, he does. Good call.
Anyway, he was this great athlete that didn't get to go, and that's basically the story of this book. It really delves into the politics of it, of why they didn't go, what was going on in the world at that time. The Soviet Union had invaded Afghanistan. This ultimately led to President Carter saying that it was one of the grossest pieces of international in diplomacy or undiplomacy, if that's a word, that ever occurred. And so they decided we're going to punish you by not. We're going to start a boycott of the Olympics and punish you for that. So that's the basic.
The other cool thing about that book is that we were able to reach Vice President Mondale, and this book was published in 2008. We were able to reach Vice President Mondale, and we spoke with him briefly and told him what we were doing, and we asked him if he'd like to participate in telling their side of the story. We wanted to get President Carter, but he was busy promoting one of his books that he had written. But Vice President Mondale was gracious enough to give us time, and he was wonderful and really a super, super classy person who really laid it out there for us. And thankfully, like I said, we were fortunate enough to have him write the foreword to the book. And it just adds a little more depth to the whole story and the history behind that boycott. So it was a fun book to read. And on top of the other ones that we've written, we're really, really proud of this one a lot. It's a really good book.
And for somebody who didn't live through that time, some people just don't realize just how hypercharged the politics were at that time between the United States and the USSR. It was just, you're starting to get to the peak of the Cold War there. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when they had us hiding under desks, thinking that, well, that's going to protect you from a nuclear attack. And
we were doing that in the 60s.
I mean, but it's true. And you know what? And you're right. It's such a shame that really the ones who got punished out of that was the athletes. Yeah. And the ones who had the least amount to do with anything that was going on, they were the ones who took the brunt of it.
Yeah. And we had asked part of our last chapter, and it was kind of like a throwaway type idea that we had. But we said, you know what, let's ask this question anyway. What would you say to the President Carter now about it? And,
if you had the chance.
Right.
And clearly we were giving them the chance through this book, but, some were very philosophical about it. Through age, they said, okay, look, we get it at the time. Some were really still upset about it and bitter that they didn't get the chance. And some just said, look, you know what? It was a lifetime ago and, I moved on. But I think in their hearts, they all felt like, it wasn't worth it, unfortunately, and they were the ones that unfortunately took the brunt of the uh, of the action that was taken by the United States government and others.
But another nice part of how we structured this book is that we didn't take sides. We just told the story. We told the story from the athlete side. We told the story from the Carter administration side, and then from history side. And that was one of the things that was pretty cool to be recognized for in some of the reviews, is that we didn't take sides. We let the story just be told by the people who were engaged in that story. And that's what we were trying to do. And that's, if you read that book, you'll find that that's the common thread or the tone throughout it. And we're, like I said, we're really proud of this book, Boycott.
And that is so refreshing in itself, because a lot of times you'll see, even inadvertently, authors or storytellers will take one side or another, and that's for, going right down the middle is the best way to go about it. And so let's talk about your first book, in which involved Olympians winning the gold medal, which, Dave, if you can put that slide up for me, please. There you go, right there. Okay, Striking Silver, the untold story of America's forgotten hockey team. Now, Tom, you and I chatted about this a couple days ago. Everybody knows about the Miracle on Ice team, rightfully so. It was an amazing event. Some do know about Squaw Valley, the first gold medal, but here is a book about the silver medal winning 1972 USA hockey team. So tell us a little bit about this one.
So, as you just mentioned, sandwiched between the 60 and 80 gold medals. This particular story evolved because our former coach, Pete Sears, who is a well-known name in Central New York Hockey Hall of Fame in Central New York and throughout the region, Lake Placid, originally from Lake Placid, was our coach. And so when Jerry and I think it was probably around 2000. This book came out in 2006. So I think it was around 2004. Jerry and I started kind of kicking around a couple ideas about a book, because at that time, Eric Cole was heavy. He was a major player in USA Hockey, and it looked pretty good that he was going to be on the Olympic team. That was the talk. And so Jerry and I said, gee, wouldn't it be great to be able to tell the story and connect it to this upcoming Olympics, which would involve Eric. So we reached out to Pete, but we also reached out. I used to work at Merrimack College in their athletic department. And one of our coaches is Stu Irving, who was on the 72 team. And Stu, so Jerry and I just said, look, if we're going to write a book, we should kind of talk to Stu and Pete right off the bat, because we have good relationships with them. And
get the temperature.
Yeah, take the temperature, right. And so we said, because at that time, Jerry and I had never written a book where, we said, we're going to write a book, right? Who knows how to write? We didn't know how to write a book, but we had people that we had spoken to that had, and some people that we work with in the industry, and said, yeah, what you're doing is the right way to do it. So anyway, I spoke with Stu, and at one point, and I knew a little bit about Stu's story, but at one point, Stu was telling me about he was drafted into Vietnam, and he little guy, great skater, really, really, really good New England player, and he was drafted into Vietnam. So he thought, gee, all my chances now of progressing into a career in hockey are gone. But he still had his dad send him over a dozen sticks and a dozen pucks, or a box of pucks. And every night he would go in a bunker, get a board, put it on the ground, and take shots. Just
Oh, wow.
right.
That's crazy.
Yeah. That's
Mekong
awesome.
Delta, okay, the Mekong Delta, where he was serving as a clerk, right in the heart of the Vietnam War. So he was
Wow.
telling me this story. One day he gets called by his CEO, commanding officer, into the office. He says, Stu, he says, you play hockey? And Stu says, well, yeah, I used to. And he says, well, I have orders here to for you to report to a Murray Williamson in Minneapolis. You know anything about that? He said,
Huh.
nope, I don't know anything about it. But he sort of did in the back of his head because he knew some people back home were trying to work to get him a tryout. And so anyway, he says, no, I don't know anything about it. He says, here are your orders, take them and you're off to Minneapolis. So Stu said, it was like a get out of jail free card, right?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. So he took it and he made his way to Minneapolis, and he met, with the team and the tryouts and stuff, and the coach Murray Williamson. Not only was Stu part of it, but Pete Sears had served already in the jungles of Vietnam, carrying a M60 patrol in the jungles. So Stu, Pete were veterans, and then there were about, what was it, Jared, 4 or 5 other guys?
Yeah, altogether there was about 5 guys that were actively in the U.S. Army.
Yeah,
No kidding.
Henry Boucher, Dick McGlynn, Tim Shee, they all had to go during their course.
And Charlie Brown.
Charlie Brown. Yeah, so all within the course of their tryouts and training, they all had to go to basic training. Well, anyway, Murray says he's giving them, there's these guys that are just giving him the business, and he's saying, he says, I know a bunch of you. Some of you have been over to Vietnam, and some of you are drafted, and some of you got to go to basic training. He says, I'm going to tell you something right now. He says, you make this team, or you go back to the Mekong Delta, to Stu. And Stu,
no pressure, right?
Yeah, right.
Oh,
Exactly. When Stu told me that, I got chills down my spine. And after I hung up the phone, I immediately called Jared and I said, so we got a book. And that's how we started to write the book. Just there, it was amazing. Then we got talked to Pete, and Stu and Pete kind of greased the skids with the other guys. And the other guys were kind of skeptical about who are these guys, who are we? And that want to tell a story about our team. We're a bunch of nobodies, and we're forgotten. And that was the beauty of it. And to this day, that they're some of our most treasured friends in hockey, the 72 team. They made us honorary members of the team and the whole thing. It's just fantastic. And
we're on all the email chains with, Mark Howe and, all these other guys, that Robbie Fatorik,
told these names. Yeah.
Wow.
It's really, it's something. These guys are the greatest.
And Jerry and I probably talk to Murray every other month, for one reason or another. So, and Murray's 91 years old, smart as a whip, still hasn't lost a step. Maybe he's lost a step, but he still gets out there and skates with all his grandchildren every year. And he's something else. And Jerry and I are, this book is really, it was a labor of love. And it's dedicated to Pete and our mom and dad, who inspired us to dream, and it really means a lot. And we just and being the first book that we ever wrote, it couldn't be more special to us, special place in our hearts.
Very honored to tell this story.
That is such a great story. That really is. And it's back when the Olympics were about the amateurs. Which I understand why they want the pros there now, and ratings, stuff like that, and which is fine. It's great. You want to see the best athletes, but there was always something special about it with when it was amateurs playing it, and a story like that couldn't be told anymore, but that is absolutely awesome. And both of those books are on Amazon, of course, much like the one that's coming out. I'm going to show it again. Icebreakers. So, Dave, if you want to pull that slide, there it is. So let's talk about this one, because I read through this and I got to tell you something, guys. This is a really fun book. This, you know what? These are the kind of books that kids need. They really do, because in my opinion, hockey, of course, this might be a little bit biased towards hockey, but it's got the most awesome history ever. I mean, I love baseball, I love football, but hockey's history to me is just, it's amazing. And, I think that kids maybe today don't know so much about it, at least especially going back into the earlier days. So a book like this really, really helps out. So tell us a little bit about the genesis of the idea for coming up with this book.
All right, Tom, you started.
Well, so, this one, again, as Jerry and I say in the author's note, we were, when we learned to read, these were the types of books that we learned to read. These were the books that we read from first page to last. And as Jerry said, we started skating. We were 4 years old, 5 years old, playing hockey. And right about the same time you're learning how to read. So the books that we first read from cover to cover were about hockey legends. And they're about Gordie Howe and Howie Morenz and Terry Sawchuk, Lester Patrick. I mean, we're going back a few years now.
Just a couple.
Yeah. And so last year around this time, maybe a little before, about a year ago, we were approached by Quarto Publishing to see if we'd be interested in writing a quote unquote kids book about hockey. And we said, well, what do you have in mind? And they said, well, that's where we were hoping you could help us out with, because we want to do a hockey book, but we don't know that much about hockey. So if you guys could steer us towards kind of what it could look like, that would be great. And so
they knew that we wrote for USA Hockey Magazine too. That was something that appealed to them. And
sure, so it helps.
And obviously, they knew that again, as Tom said, that we were, on it in terms of knowing what was going on in the hockey world.
Yeah. So
because if we pull a couple of slides here, so Dave, if you want to put the forward slide that you were just talking about, that nope, there's Jim Craig who wrote the forward for you.
Yeah.
The next one. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Oh, you said.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah. So there it is, right there, your introduction. So I had to put that out there because those two handsome young lads right there are you two. So
yeah. We were 12 years old there and playing for the Oswego Pee Wee team, and
pretty good Pee Wee team that year too.
I think we have a pretty good team. I think we lost the state championship that year, unfortunately.
Oh.
But I mean that's who we were, and going back to Jim Craig,
put that.
We were 12 years old. This was the year when they won up in Lake Placid, and that's 3 hours away from where we grew up, from Oswego. And so a month after the USA won the gold medal, we were playing in a tournament in Lake Placid on the very same ice that we just watched our heroes.
Oh man. What an experience that had to be.
What a thrill it was for us to have Jim Craig involved with this book. And I can tell you, we can tell you that, he is a gold medal winner in hockey and every bit a gold medal person in life. It's so great when your expectations of someone are met with, who you think this person is. And he and his team at Gold Medal Strategies have been tremendous in helping us with this book and writing the foreword. And he's been just a great. It's been great to get to know him a little bit through this. So we were really appreciative and again honored to be able to have him be a part of the book. And his forward is, it's great. It's a really.
I love how he talks about growing up playing on the ponds and just, falling in love with the game as a kid. And I'll tell you, Jimmy Craig, all those guys on that 1980 team they're still around. They're fantastic. They're always on social media. They're always out, promoting the program and just doing good all around, and just a bunch of great guys.
Yeah.
Well, one of the great things about Jim was that, and one of the reasons that Jerry and I, thought of Jim was because his daughter had just had a baby girl recently, and I think it was his third grandchild. So we thought, well, gee, maybe he'd be interested to, because it's a kid's book, or geared towards a kid's book, right? Younger people. Maybe he'd be interested to tell his story as a kid growing up and the dream of that he realized. And so we took a shot. And thankfully, like Jerry said, his people at Gold Medal Strategies connected with them, and we connected with Jim, and they couldn't have helped us more. And Jim, like I said, just can't say enough good things about Jim Craig and all those guys. Jerry and I've been fortunate enough to speak and get to know a few of the guys on those teams, some of the bigger bold-faced names, and they're all just fantastic people. So hockey people, right? We're hockey
Absolutely. People. Absolutely. That's another great thing about hockey is, very rarely do you come across somebody who's not willing to help out or to talk hockey or anything like that. Hockey is just that close-knit community. No matter how big you think it is, it's still a small world.
Yep.
But, I love the way you guys broke this book down, too, because it's broken down, starts off with the original 6, and then you're talking about the early players, and like you mentioned, the Howie Morenzes that the kids may not know about nowadays. And it goes all the way through international players. And I love, too, how in the corners on some of the pages, you got definitions for terms that maybe you don't know about, which was a great idea. Was that something that you would set out to do to help kids understand better? Or?
Yeah, look, those are all fun things. I mean, you hear every now and then the guys talking about their flow or their lettuce, and like what? I'm just like, hey, that air. It's, the flow and the lettuce these days, a little bit lighter. Still got it, but
I know that's why I got to ask it. So
but so terms like that, we had a lot of fun going through trying to think of what's going to keep kids interested in reading into the next page. And so those little nuggets that we had about the different words or the different expressions and some of the great things that we wanted to talk about, like Daryl Sittler scored 10 points in a game one night. He scored 6 goals and had 4 assists one night. And we really wanted to somehow highlight that and write about it, but it wasn't fitting. So in where we thought we wanted to fit it, or where we tried to fit it. So we said, you know what, let's just set that aside and use it as a fun stat, and so things like that, like what you're alluding to, the fun facts, the little
some of the fun quotes, some of the fun quotes.
Yeah. It reminded me like a printed version of Peter Puck.
Peter. Well, I love you for that for saying that, because Peter Puck was.
We're part of his original fan club.
There you go. See?
Still have the sticker.
Oh yeah,
that's great.
And so Peter Puck taught us how to skate and the rules of the game. And so, like Tom said, these were the types of books that we grew up learning how to read. And our mission, if you will, in writing this was to write a book that hopefully someday, the kids that are reading it now will be like, yeah, this is one of the books that I learned about hockey history, but I also learned how to read.
Right, right,
Yeah.
exactly. And and speaking of all that, in your forward, you're after my own heart because you mentioned watching Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday nights on CKWS, which we had down here too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just in my mind, it kind of throws back to a time when you couldn't watch every game, right? There was
Right.
no streaming services, there was nothing like that. Saturday night was when you got to watch hockey, or
Yeah.
maybe like an occasional game if you found like a WWOR or something like that, you might be able
Yeah.
to catch a
Right.
Rangers or an Islanders game.
Yeah.
But really,
Right.
Saturday night in my parents' living room was must see TV, CKWS. Nobody else is watching anything. I don't care.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. In between periods, you go down to the basement, play a little ping pong or shoot a little pool, and be rack up, and there you go. That's what it was.
Either that or you stick the hockey stick up into the living room and hope your mother
right.
doesn't see it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's right. Mini hockey.
And of course, when Showdown was on, you couldn't step away.
Yeah.
When they had Showdown, that was a big thing, and so that's really where we're coming from with this in writing this book. And like you said, we started off with the past history and kind of an homage to the books that we grew up with Howie Morenz and Gordie Howe and Terry Sawchuk, as we mentioned, and move it on to all these players that we watched in the growing up, Bobby Orr and Bobby Clark, who even though we're Ranger fans, Bobby Clark
Canadians
and Montreal Canadians, Bobby Clark had a special place, always has in our hearts, because the Broad Street Bullies they came of age during that time, and we just loved how he played, and those teams,
saw it for a different reason too, because some people may say that the Broad Street Bullies and Bobby Clark were dirty, and listen, that was the game. But the past,
those are products of the game.
But the thing that drew Jerry and me and some of our friends to that team, and Bobby Clark in particular, was his passion to win. And when we were growing up, that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to play hockey, we wanted to play well, and we wanted to win.
Absolutely.
And so that's and to this day, we've never met Bobby Clark in person, but that's still on our bucket list. To be nice to meet Bobby Clark and tell him what he meant to us.
Plus, he was the classic hockey player, right? Missing his 4 front teeth.
Yeah.
Big lettuce on his head. It was perfect.
We would play street hockey and we'd put, black licorice. Black licorice across our teeth, and I'm gonna be Bobby Clark today, or one of our friends, a great Bobby Orr fan, loved Bobby Orr, always still does, and he would always be Bobby Orr, and then whoever was playing the net was Eddie Jockman or
sure.
Bernie Perrine or
Ken Dryden,
Ken Dryden.
And then when the Russians came in, is Vladislav Tretiak.
Oh yes.
So we even as kids in the U.S., we appreciated the Russians and the team from the Soviet Union to the point where it didn't matter. Vladislav Tretiak was the greatest goalie along with Ken Dryden.
Absolutely.
During that time growing up. So if you were in the nets, you were Vladislav Tretiak,
Right. And I love how you guys mentioned that in the book.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't ignore the fact that, the Soviet Union really changed the way that hockey was played globally.
Yes, they did.
And the American way now certainly was influenced heavily by the Soviet Union style of play and some of the other European teams, but in particular, watching those Soviet Union teams. And so we felt it very important to include some of those guys in our book.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as well as we felt it really important to highlight women's hockey as well. So
absolutely. I mean, you guys really truly did cover the game. And I got one more slide here: the goal scorers, which I grew up. I was the greatest there, Wayne Gretzky. I grew up a Wayne Gretzky fan. He was my idol, so it was heartbreaking for me to see Ovechkin break his goal scoring record.
Yeah.
But Gretzky, as usual, with class, just handled it absolutely with class. If they always talk about Gretzky's unbreakable records, and they always said the goal record was one of the unbreakable ones. I would be more inclined to believe maybe the 92 goals in one season was more unbreakable. I kind of felt that if one of the big Gretzky records could fall, it was going to be the overall goal records. Because to be perfectly honest with you, and this is just an opinion of mine, I felt that if Mike Bossy or Mario Lemieux could have played a full career,
absolutely,
one of those two would have been the one that did it.
No question.
Totally agree.
Well, that's we had somebody ask us, how difficult was it to figure out what players you wanted to include in this, and the goal scorers was a particularly difficult one. But when you think about who we picked to highlight, it was Maurice Richard, who was the goal scorer early on. I mean, the award for most goals scored in a season is named after him.
Sure.
So, and then secondly, when you think about pure goal scorers, you nailed it. Mike Bossy, I don't know if there's a more pure goal scorer. Brett Hull is along those lines as well. But Mike Bossy
absolutely
had almost, well, I guess he had, I don't have the exact number, but 550 something goals in 10 years.
Right.
With a bad back towards the end.
That's amazing. It truly is.
So, we pushed, Ovechkin certainly was mentioned in there, and he's part of the book, that's for sure. But we just felt like, some of these guys were like Mike Bossy and Maurice Richard, the Rocket, were guys that you need to highlight.
Think about this. We didn't even give Phil Esposito something.
Exactly.
I mean, amazingly enough, we had Guy Lafleur, Ovechkin,
Brett Hull.
Yep, Brett Hull.
And I can't remember the other one, but Phil Esposito didn't even get a thumbnail. We worked him in as best we could.
Yari Curry was the other one.
Yari Curry, I was yes.
Who was another pure goal scorer.
Absolutely.
601 career goals. I mean,
Yeah.
That was probably the hardest one. That probably was the hardest one to kind of narrow down for us.
Yeah, and there's exactly. There's so many of them. I mean, how do you possibly, if you were to try to include, you'd have it written like 5 or 6 volumes. I mean, that's there's just no doubt about that.
And then that, we're talking about all these great players from the past, but these players, Connor McDavid, he might end up breaking Ovechkin's record. The one that I don't think that will be broken. It could be 212 points in a season.
Yeah, that's going to be difficult. That is
back to back 200 point seasons. I don't see it happening just because these goalies are so good now. We don't see 8 to 7 games. We see 3-2, 2-1, 1-0. I just don't think we're going to see, like you said, the 92 goals. Probably we won't see that.
I'll tell you one that won't be broken. I'm going to go on record here and say one of Gretzky's records that will not be broken is the 50 goals in 39 games.
Yeah, that's really tough. Really, really tough.
You think you get a goal a game and you're doing okay, right? So it's going to take 50 games. 39 games to score 50 goals. Now, can it be done? Yeah. Will it be done? I'm going to say no.
Probably not. And I'm going to go with the all-time assist record too, because I can't possibly see somebody coming up with, 1,927 assists he had for his career. I don't see anyone even coming near that. So, Don't worry,
know,
Wayne. Some of your records really are untouchable.
As we touch on in the book, you know, some of these players today, the Austin Matthews and Connor McDavid, Connor Bedard, and Cal McCarr, you know, all these young Halbeck from Winnipeg, all these great players. It was Draisaitl, you know, some that are still playing right now. Matthew Tkachuk. You know, it was important for us, obviously, to include these players too, because again, these are going to be the players that the kids reading this book are going to relate to, you know, when they're in their 40s, 50s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and they're having kids, and they're saying they're going to be the ones that said, I remember when I saw Matthew Tkachuk hoist the Stanley Cup, or I remember, you know, Nathan McKinnon, and what an explosive player he was, and Connor McDavid. So,
Right.
you know, that's something that was really important for us to do, to connect the past with the present as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys did such a fantastic job with this. Like I said, it's such an enjoyable read. June 3rd is the big day that it officially comes out, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's going to be on Amazon. Is it going to be anywhere else besides Amazon?
Barnes and Noble, Amazon, any independent bookstores. You know, we have it's listed in some of our social media, but definitely you can get it on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and it, you know, in some of the local bookstores as well, for sure. I know in Oswego you can get it at the River's End, and we'll be doing a book signing there soon. And you know, we're just super excited about it, and hope that all of our friends and family and former competitors and future competitors, because Jerry and I still play in Central New York and beyond, will pick up this book for their kids and their grandchildren especially. And
for them, it's not just a kids' book.
Yeah, and
it's for
them,
kids of all ages, really.
Yeah, kids of
Well,
all
I'll tell
ages.
you what. I've already got in mind a few people who I know could use a copy of this, and I already know those people are very hard to buy for. So you guys have given me a fantastic idea, and I appreciate that. So, and I appreciate you guys taking the time to come on and talk to us, because, like I said, this has been a real honor and so much fun. Fantastic book, guys, and best of luck, because I know you're going to sell a ton of copies.
Thank
Your
you.
lips to God's ears.
Well, thanks again, fellas. We appreciate it. That's Tom and Jerry Caraccioli. We appreciate them coming on, and that is all the time we got this week. So we will see you next time on the Central New York Hockey Report podcast.